in this series, we have been talking about navigating relationships in a way that honor God, ourselves, and others. And so this includes the red flags that maybe we want to notice and avoid. This includes the respect we want to give and receive. And this also includes the relationships that we want to have with people who care about us and support us. And so, although this series has been really centered around dating relationships, I think what we're talking about tonight can really be important to any of our relationships with our friends, with our family, with our peers at school, or with somebody that maybe we are interested in dating. So, as we're talking tonight, whether you have dated before, whether you are interested in dating but you've never had the chance, whether you're not even interested, or maybe you're not ready to date, or you're just not old enough to date, this talk is for you guys, and this talk is important for each of you. And so, friends, with that, let me ask you this question. What do you think the perfect dating relationship or friendship looks like? Turn to your partner and talk about it for a second. What do you think the perfect dating relationship or friendship should look like? What do you think? Can you guys gather all together right here, or Kaylin and Madeline right here? You want to scoot over and be friends? You gotta put some energy into the scooting. I hope it was appropriate.
Oh, it was.
Okay. Did you include Marcus on this conversation? Perfect dating relationship or friendship. All right, so bring it back up. What are some things that you guys talked about, Nick?
No cheating and being loyal.
Being loyal, okay. Yes, Marcus. Being respectful. Ashlyn? Knowing that the person you're dating has flaws. That's a good one. Anybody over here? What'd you guys say? What'd you say, Katie? Perfect dating or friendship relationship? You should be able to trust them. And what was the ending part? They're not going to lie to you. Yeah. So some things that I'm hearing from your guys' conversations and from some of those shout outs is so much of them have to do with what you hope the other person brings to the table, right? Everybody talked about what they thought the other person was going to bring to the table. And we think about dating and friendships, we focus a lot on who we want the other person that we're dating or in a friendship to be like, what we hope they'll do, how we want them to treat us, and even maybe what we hope they'll look like. And I think that one is a little bit more specific to dating, right? And while all of that stuff is definitely really important to consider, right? I think you guys bring up really, really good points. I do think they should be loyal. I think it's great that we know that they have flaws, and so we should be respectful of that they don't lie to us and things like that. It also leaves out a pretty important point for us to consider, which is you. You guys are the other half of the equation when it comes to dating and friendships. Since it takes two people to make a relationship work, shouldn't we be focusing on both people? Shouldn't we be asking ourselves what we can be bringing to the table too? And so I think all of us in here want to have a healthy relationship at some point, right? We all want to have healthy friendships, healthy dating relationships. And so what can we do to make sure that we're taking the steps to get there, to have those healthy relationships and those healthy friendships? Guys, remember, even if you're not dating right now, maybe you're not interested, or maybe you're just not old enough, this really matters for your everyday relationships, for your ones with your friends, the ones with your siblings and your parents or your guardians, with your teammates, with your schoolmates at school who you're sitting next to. So the big question, and what we're going to be talking about tonight, is how can we make sure that we're focusing on the right things when it comes to dating or when it comes to our friendships? And so we're going to actually dive into talking about this really cool guy named Paul. I messed up Guy and Paul and I said Gaul. Okay, everybody say Paul. Paul is my bestie. You know I love talking about Paul. So Paul is a really important figure in the Old Testament. He was alive around 2,000 years ago, and Paul wrote a letter to the Christians in a town called Corinth. Everybody say Corinth. Did you make sure you got the on the end? Yeah, good. Okay, just making sure you're saying it right. Corinth, like the th. So Paul's life had been completely changed by Jesus, right? He didn't know Jesus, and then he met Jesus, and his life was changed forever. So much so that he started sharing the good news of Jesus with people all over the world, including in Corinth. So after he spent time with them, Paul wrote to the people and they're a message to remind them of what God said is best for them. So that is actually what we're going to be looking in tonight. So in that first letter of Corinthians, everybody say Corinthians. That is one of the books of the Bible, 1 Corinthians. Paul included a couple of thoughts that I think can really help us specifically when it comes to our dating relationships or our friendships. So let's look it up right here. So it says, you might be really familiar. This is a very famous verse. So it says here, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every single circumstance. So friends, what we could see from this list is Paul is listing here what God says that love looks like. And God says love looks patient and kind and faithful and hopeful and lasting. God says that it's not rude or prideful, that love doesn't keep score, it doesn't give up. So when we think about that kind of love, the kind of love that Paul explains in here, the kind of love that God explains to us, isn't that exactly what we would want in a relationship? Right? We want somebody that is patient and kind and loving and caring. But if we're also being honest, we usually think about this type of love that Paul mentioned as being about the other person in a relationship. I know that I'm guilty of this. When I look at this, I'm like, yes, I want a love that's like that. Guys, we want the other person to be patient. We want them to be kind. We hope that they're faithful, or like what Nick says, they're loyal. That is like the fancy word you guys use for faithful nowadays. I use faithful. You guys use loyal. You're cool. And we definitely don't want them to be somebody that brags or acts prideful, right? We want them not to give up on us, not to give up on a relationship. And so to be clear, guys, those are also really great things to be looking out in a relationship. It's not bad to be thinking about those things. God wants us to look for these types of characteristics in any relationships, all the way from friendships to one day a dating relationship. But we shouldn't just leave it there at looking at that other person. Instead of only focusing on finding all of this really great stuff in other people, we need to stop and look at what that looks like for ourselves too. We need to consider if we're the kind of person that we would want to date. So we need to ask ourselves, am I patient? Am I kind? Am I loyal? Are you guys loyal out there? Because loyalty was said from a bunch of people in here. Do I brag? Do I tend to get jealous a lot? Do I always want to get my own way? I know I am personally guilty of that. I love getting my way, guys. Love it. But guys, when it comes to a relationship, what we bring to the table matters too, as much as what the other person brings to the table. Being honest about that is a moving part of getting towards being who God has made us to be, who God wants us to be, who God has created us to be. A person who is patient and kind, faithful, hopeful, and all of the other things that Paul mentioned. And so here's what I want for us to remember tonight. When it comes to relationships, dating or otherwise, God cares about us showing love before receiving and finding love. So start there. Guys, instead of putting all of our effort and energy into finding that person that you want to be with, focus on yourself. Focus on becoming the person that you want to be first. If I want somebody that is loving and kind, then you better hope that I'm going to work myself to be loving and kind, so I'm bringing that to the relationship too. And so whether you're dating or not, you guys have an opportunity every single day to live out the characteristics of love that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians. Guys, God cares so deeply about us showing love before looking for love. And the reality is that God has given us the tools and the ability and the power we need to become more like the type of people that God has made us to be, which is what we see in 1 Corinthians. So instead of us using dating as a way to look for the right person or the picture perfect relationship that we talked about just a couple minutes ago, why don't we focus on developing the characteristics of love that Paul listed for us? So we could start with that here. So in the theme of red flags, relationship, respect, and relationships, the first one that we have where we could start is the red flags category, guys. So first we need to identify some of these red flags. Guys, it is okay to admit our own red flags. Actually, it is very freeing sometimes to admit when maybe we've made a mistake. Maybe we realize that we're doing something that's not so kind so that we can make the ability to change it. It's a great place to start to become the person you hope to be, as being more honest about where you need help. It's okay to ask for help. So use Paul's list to help you identify the characteristics that maybe we all could use a little bit more work on. And so the second one is that respect category. So focus on one quality. So start the process of becoming the person that God wants us and called us to be by picking just one of the characteristics. All of those characteristics are great, but I recognize that it's hard to be able to utilize and be all of those things at one time, right? We're going to mess up, so let's focus on one. Let's make it easy. Maybe you could use more patience, or you would like to be quicker to forgive. Maybe you want to cut back on the rude comments you make, or you'd like to be more thoughtful, or you'd like to be more loyal than you have in the past relationships or friendships. What if you started by focusing on just one characteristic of yourself that you want to grow in? It's a really great way to not only respect yourself, but to respect the person that God wants you to be. And so then the third one is the relationships category. It's for us to practice the quality that we pick. Guys, who you're becoming affects who you are in those relationships, in the now and in the future. So focus your energy on becoming more of who you want to be and what you would want to look for in a relationship by practicing the characteristics that you pick to work on. So if you have a tendency to be rude, which I am quick to sometimes be rude, I will admit that. So for me, I practice giving compliments to people instead on purpose. So I make sure I go out of my way to be purposely positive and kind to that person. So then that way it helps me cut back on maybe some of the rude things I might think in my head, or maybe even say out loud. Maybe if you tend to be impatient, practice taking a pause before responding to somebody when they're speaking this week. Maybe take a deep breath and think about what you're going to say, and if that's an actually kind thing to say, or if you're just being really impatient in that moment. Or instead of holding a grudge, practice bringing up and talking through something that hurt your feelings that somebody did in a kind and loving way with them, so then that way you can work through it together. Guys, God cares so much about us showing love before looking for love. And so keep that in mind as you navigate your friendships and your dating relationships this week and as you go on. This is something that we could take with us in any relationship. And I've really loved getting to talk about this with you guys tonight and ending out this series altogether, especially with this topic at looking at ourselves. But I hope the conversation doesn't stop here. Guys, I hope you're going to continue to talk about the red flags that you want to avoid with yourself and with other people. I hope you continue to get the respect that you hope to give and to receive. And I especially hope that you have the relationships that you want to be in with people who care about you and support you, just like with your small group. Your small group is a great place to start practicing these things with each other, holding each other accountable. Talk to each other about what you want to work on this week, and then check in with each other and see how you're doing. And be encouraging and be kind to each other and patient with each other when maybe we mess up. But that's the best way that we can start growing with this. So I hope you will continue to encourage to build the characteristics that you hope to see in a relationship by building them in yourselves.